Sebastian Ashworth, Duke of Hartwell, recognized his enemy's daughter the instant the priest told him to lift her veil. He was 3 paces from the altar, the lace of his cuff resting against the polished rail, and as the gauze rose, he saw not the stranger he had been promised, but the face of the only man in England his father had taught him to despise. Softened, refined, painted onto the bones of a young woman who was, in the next 30 seconds, going to become his wife. He could end it here. He had every legal right. The paper folded inside his coat, the betrothal contract, named her as Miss Beatrix Marbury, niece of Lady Petersham of Berkeley Square. The paper did not name her father. The paper did not contain the word Mortimer. But she did. She stood there in her ivory silk and her grandmother's pearls, 25 years old at most, with the set of jaw he had last seen across the polished length of his father's study 8 years ago, when the elder Lord Mortimer had walked into that room a wealthy man and walked out a forger. The priest cleared his throat. The congregation behind them, some 400 of London's most exacting eyes, rustled in the pews like a forest before rain. Sebastian said nothing. He did not lift the veil himself. He let the priest do it. He looked at her face, open, frightened, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with safety, and he made his choice. He took her hand. He married her. He could have told her, at the altar, what he had recognized. He did not. He had reasons. He was not yet certain which of those reasons would prove the strongest. She kept her eyes on the altar cloth through most of the ceremony. Once, when his thumb brushed the ridge of her knuckle, she flinched. Not from disgust, he thought, but from the wrong kind of attention being paid too late. Her hand was cold. Her ring finger trembled when he slid the gold over it. She whispered her vows so quietly that only he and the priest heard them. Her voice cracked on the word obey, then steadied, then carried the line through to its end with the determined competence of someone who had been rehearsing in front of a mirror for a week. He noticed everything. He had been trained to notice. He noticed the way she tucked a stray strand of dark hair behind her ear with the smallest finger of her left hand. The gesture, exactly, of a girl he had glimpsed across a Surrey hedgerow when he was 18, and she had been 13, and her father had still been the wealthiest commoner in 3 counties. He noticed the locket at her throat, oval, gold, no bigger than a sovereign, that she touched once, hard, when the priest pronounced her his. When the bells rang and the Duke turned her to face the church, and she met 400 staring faces with a smile so brave it made his chest ache, he understood that she did not know he had recognized her. She thought she had succeeded. She thought she had hidden. He let her go on thinking it. The wedding breakfast was held at the Petersham townhouse on Berkeley Square, where Lady Petersham, a pale woman of 50 in deep claret silk, accepted the Duke's compliments with the kind of relief that only a woman who has spent 4 months engineering a particular marriage can feel. Sebastian watched her over the rim of his glass. He watched the new Duchess of Hartwell take her seat beside him. He watched the way Lady Petersham's eyes went, repeatedly, to the Duke's left hand, as though she expected it to draw a pistol and were checking that it had not. The aunt knew. Whatever else was uncertain in this room, the aunt knew exactly who the bride's father had been. To the Duchess. A man with grey side whiskers raised his glass at the foot of the table. May she bring as much warmth to Hartwell House as the late Duke once brought to this very square. The room drank. Beatrix's hand jerked, very slightly, on the stem of her glass. Sebastian, without looking, settled his palm over the back of her wrist and felt the pulse there move from a gallop to something nearer a walk. "You are kind, sir," he said to the room. I think she will. Beatrix turned her head. Their eyes met for the first time since the altar. She had her father's eyes. He had not noticed it under the veil. They had been downcast there. Now, in full afternoon light through the dining room window, the colour was unmistakable. A clear hazel that went green when the candles caught it. Lord Mortimer's eyes. The eyes that had, in his father's study, watched a forged signature dry on a contract and not blinked. But the expression behind them was not Mortimer's at all. Mortimer had looked at Sebastian's father with the particular, slow contempt of a man who has decided that ruin is owed. This girl looked at Sebastian like a person standing at the bottom of a stair she did not know the height of, gathering courage to climb. He took his hand off her wrist. He smiled at her. The smile was not for her. It was for the room. He had learned at 16 how to make those two smiles indistinguishable. You are very quiet, Your Grace, she said. Her voice, freed of the church's acoustics, was lower than he had expected. Educated. Almost amused when the nervousness was stripped away. I am thinking. Of what? Of how strange it is to acquire a wife I have not yet had a conversation with. A flicker of something, relief maybe, or surprise, crossed her face. You could have arranged a conversation, sir. I would not have refused. I know. Then why? Because I wished to see, he said very quietly. What kind of woman married a man she had not been allowed to study? And what kind have you discovered? A brave one. Her eyes stilled on his, just for a second. Then she lifted her glass, drank a controlled, deliberate sip, and said, Then we agree on at least one thing, Your Grace. I had thought it would take longer. He almost laughed. He turned the laugh into a slow exhale and looked down at his plate. She had her father's tongue, too. This was going to be more interesting than he had feared. The carriage ride to Hartwell House, his country seat 3 hours south of London, was made in near silence. She sat opposite him in a peacock blue travelling gown that, even in the dim interior of the coach, drew the last of the afternoon light to itself. Her hands rested folded in her lap. Her bonnet ribbons stirred faintly with the lurch of the wheels. She watched the hedges roll past the window and asked him no questions about his house, his staff, his family, or the bedroom he had had prepared for her. He found the silence uncharacteristic of brides he had heard described by other men. She remarked, finally, on his lack of questions. He replied that he had been told it was bad form to interrogate one's husband on the day of the wedding. When he asked her who had said so, and she answered that it had been her aunt, he told her, with the smallest dryness, that her aunt was mistaken. She allowed, looking at the window, that her aunt was often mistaken. The corner of her mouth moved. It was not yet a smile, but it had ambition. Then permit me to ask one. Why did you marry me? She had asked it like a chess move, cool, considered, watching for his face. He gave her, in return, the answer he had decided on between the altar and the church door. Because Lady Petersham presented me, in confidence, with an unblemished young woman of good family who possessed wit, sense, and no living father to negotiate me down. Because I am 30 next year, and my mother has made my life a torment about an heir. And because, here he held her gaze, the miniature your aunt sent me of you persuaded me that I could keep my temper through breakfast. The flicker, this time, was harder to read. Some of it was relief. Some of it was something else. A calculation, perhaps, at the words, no living father. "I am sorry to disappoint you on the third count," she said mildly. "I was painted in better light than this." "You were painted accurately." "Then your standard is low, sir." "My standard is precise. There is a difference." She turned her head to the window again, and he watched her in profile while she pretended she was not letting herself be watched. Her cheekbones, in this light, were her mother's. He had seen Lady Mortimer once at a Christmas levee when he was a child, and the architecture of the face had stayed with him because Lady Mortimer had been celebrated in 3 counties for it. Beatrix had inherited it whole. But the chin and the eyes, those were Lord Mortimer's. The man who had ruined Sebastian's father with a forged stock certificate 8 years ago, 3 months before Sebastian's father had been lost to what the family called a fever and what the doctor, privately, had called heartbreak made visible. If he had married her to revenge himself on her father, he would have told her at the altar. He had not married her for that. He still did not know precisely what he had married her for. He intended to find out before she did. Hartwell House rose at the end of a beech avenue at twilight, and Beatrix made a sound, small, involuntary, more breath than word, when she first saw it through the window. "Yes," he said, without inflection. "I had not realized it was so—" "Large?" "Old." He looked at her sharply. It was not the answer he had expected. "Older than the title," he said. "The West Range was a Plantagenet hunting lodge. My great-grandfather pulled down what could not be saved and built around what could." "Around what could," she repeated. "I should like to see what could." "Tomorrow, then." The carriage halted on the gravel sweep. 2 footmen in dark blue livery handed her down. Mrs. Greaves, the housekeeper, a small, white-capped woman of 60, whose face had not changed in the 18 years she had served the family, curtsied to the new Duchess with the kind of dry efficiency that promised neither warmth nor cruelty. "Your Grace, dinner will be in an hour. Shall I show you to your rooms?" "Please." Sebastian remained on the gravel as the women disappeared into the house. His coachman waited. His valet waited. He stood looking up at the lit east window above the portico, his mother's old window, before her widowhood had moved her permanently to Bath, and felt, for the first time since the priest had told him to lift the veil, the full weight of what he had done that morning. He had married Mortimer's girl. He had done it on purpose, and now he was going to have to live with her. Dinner was a polite, small affair, only the 2 of them, 3 courses, no wine after the soup. He had given the staff orders that the bride was to be treated with full ceremony but no spectacle. He did not want to overwhelm her. He also did not want to flatter her. She came down in a different gown, deep amber silk with cream lace at the cuffs, hair coiled simply, the locket still at her throat, and took her place at the foot of the long table, half a county away from him at the head. He told her, mildly, that this would not do. He could not speak to his wife from a distance of 14 feet. When she asked whether he would move, he said no, and that she would. He indicated the chair at his right hand without raising his voice. She rose, walked the length of the table with her chin level, and sat where he had pointed. Her shoulder was within reach of his. He smelled, very faintly, lavender and something cleaner. Perhaps rain on stone, perhaps imagination. "What does one talk about?" she said, "at the first private dinner of one's married life?" "Anything one likes." "That is generous." "That is strategic." She permitted herself, this time, the smile. It was small, skeptical, and entirely her father's. He looked away from it, at the candles, and said, "Tell me about your childhood." He had not planned to ask. He heard the question leave his mouth and felt his own pulse step up. She paused. "It was uneventful," she said, after a measured beat. "My mother and I lived quietly in Wiltshire until I was 18. My aunt brought me to London the year I lost my mother. I've had 2 seasons. This is my 3rd. He pressed gently. "Wiltshire?" he asked, naming a region. She named the village in turn, Marbury Hollow. He observed, as if remarking on the soup, that Marbury must have been her mother's family seat. She agreed it had been. He asked then about her father. The pause lengthened by exactly half a heartbeat. He counted it. "My father was lost when I was very young. We did not speak of him often." "I am sorry." "Are you?" He held her eyes. "Of every man's death," he said, "yes. I am always sorry." Then, because he could not help himself, because the second piece of the test had already been laid down before the first one's verdict was in. What was his name? She did not flinch. She had been ready for the question. She had clearly been ready for it for years. "Marbury," she said. "Charles Marbury." It was the cleanest lie he had ever heard delivered at his own table. He inclined his head. He picked up his glass. He smiled at her, the public smile, the one that meant nothing. "Then we shall not speak of him often, either." She drank without looking at him. He understood, in that exact moment, 2 things at once. The first was that she was not lying out of malice. She was lying out of necessity. And she had been lying out of necessity for so long that the lie had become a kind of armor she did not know how to take off. The second was that she would not survive the day she found out he had known. So he was not going to tell her. Not yet. Not until he had learned, slowly and exactly, what kind of woman had been built inside that armor. The first week passed in a strange politeness. He gave her the run of the house. He gave her a key to the library, the morning room, the east garden, the linen store, and the dovecot. He told the staff she was to be treated as the mistress of Hartwell, full stop, with no qualifier. The housekeeper accepted the order without expression, and the steward without surprise. He saw her at breakfast. He saw her at dinner. In between, he kept to his estate office and his correspondence and the long stable corridor where he attended every morning to a young chestnut mare who had been brought up half-broken and still flinched at men in greatcoats. She, for her part, walked the grounds. She read. She wrote 3 letters, none of which, when he glanced at the post tray, were addressed to her aunt. She sat at the pianoforte in the long gallery and played, badly, a piece by Haydn that her mother had presumably taught her. She did not ask him to share her bed. He had not expected her to. He had been very careful on the wedding night to make it clear by his absence that no claim would be made before she had asked for one. He had spent that night in his dressing room, with a book about cattle disease that he had not opened. On the 7th evening, he came in from the stables to find her in the library, on her knees on the carpet, surrounded by a low half-moon of his father's correspondence. She looked up. Her cheeks were flushed. Her hair had loosened. She was holding a folded letter. "You said," she began, and stopped and recalibrated. "You told me I might use this room." "You may." "Did you also intend that I should read your father's papers?" "I did not intend it. I do not forbid it." "There is—" She stopped again. She closed the letter against her palm. "There is correspondence in this drawer that ought to be filed." "Yes." "Why has it not been?" He stepped further into the room and shut the door behind him. The fire had burned low. The lamps on the bookcases threw long shadows across her face. She looked up at him without rising, and he saw that her hands were shaking and that her chin was lifted in exactly the angle her father had used at the precise moment he had been handed Sebastian's father's accusation. "Because," he said, "I have not yet decided what to do with it." "With the correspondence?" "With my father's grievance against your father." The colour left her face all at once. He had done it. He had said the word. He had not intended to say it. He had intended to wait. He had spent 8 days in his own house letting her keep her name, and now, in 3 quiet sentences, he had taken it back from her. She stood up. The folded letter fell from her hand to the carpet. She did not pick it up. She walked, very slowly, to the fireplace, put one hand on the mantel for balance, and turned to face him with an expression that contained no surprise, only a long, exhausted recognition. "How long have you known?" she said. "Since the altar." "Since the—" She closed her eyes. "Since the moment the veil came up?" "Yes." "And you married me anyway?" "Yes." "Why?" He took a step toward her. She did not move. He stopped 2 paces short and put his hands behind his back like a schoolmaster preparing to recite, because if he had not held them behind his back, he was not certain what they would have done. "I do not yet have the answer to that," he said. "I will when you do." "That is not an answer." "No, it is the truth, which is sometimes inconvenient enough to pass for one. I knew you the moment the veil rose. I had every right to refuse the contract at the altar rail, in front of 400 witnesses, and to send your aunt back to Berkeley Square in disgrace. I did not. I do not believe I did it from charity. I do not believe I did it from revenge. If I had, I would have told you in the carriage. I do not believe I did it from desire, though I am not above desire, and I have eyes. I believe, and this is the part I cannot yet explain to myself, let alone to you, that I did it because I needed to know who you had become in the 8 years since your father stopped being your father." 8 years, she said. Her hand on the mantel had gone bone white. "That is when—" "That is when he was lost." "And when your father was lost?" 3 months later. "From what you call—" She drew a long, deliberate breath. "From what you call the fever?" "Yes." "Your Grace, Sebastian." She had not used his Christian name before. The use of it now was not affection. It was the end of formality. "What did you imagine you were going to find?" "A woman like him." "And?" "I have not found her." "What have you found?" "I do not know yet." She closed her eyes. He saw a tear move along the edge of her lashes, hang, and slide. She made no sound. "You should have told me," she said. "Yes." "At the altar, in the carriage, at the dinner?" "Yes." "Why did you not?" "Because—" He did not know he was going to say this either. "I was afraid you would leave." The fire cracked. A log shifted. Somewhere very far below them in the house, a clock chimed the half-hour. She opened her eyes. "I cannot leave," she said. "I am married to you." "You can absent yourself. There are women who do." "And you wished to prevent that." "I wished to give us a week first." "A week of what?" "A week of your unguarded face." She took her hand off the mantel. She walked past him, all the way to the door. She did not look at him as she opened it. She did not slam it. She closed it behind her with the careful, precise hand of a woman who had been raised to be quiet about disappointment. He stood alone in the library for a long time after she had gone. The folded letter lay on the carpet where she had dropped it. He did not pick it up. He looked into the low fire and understood, with the cold clarity that comes after a difficult truth has been spoken but not yet absorbed, that he had told the truth twice in one conversation, and that the second truth, the one about being afraid, had been more dangerous than the first. She did not come down to breakfast. She did not come down to dinner. On the second evening, she sent a brief, perfectly composed note by Mrs. Greaves that said only, "I am unwell. Please excuse me. B." He sent up a tray with a sprig of hawthorn from the south wall. He did not know why he had cut the hawthorn. He had walked past it on the way back to the house, and his hand had decided. The tray came back untouched. The hawthorn came back broken in half. He understood that, too. On the third morning, he walked into the breakfast room, expecting another absence, and found her at the table. She wore a riding habit in deep ruby, the first color he had seen her choose for herself, and her hair was tied back severely. She had not slept. He could see it in the bruise of skin under her eyes, and in the way she did not bother to hide it. "Sit down," she said. He sat. "I have been thinking," she said, "about what kind of marriage we are now in. I have decided I do not yet know. I would like to find out without leaving this house, because I do not wish to give your London world the satisfaction of a story they can tell. I would also like to find out without your further interference." "You will have it." "I have a condition." "Name it." "You will not lie to me again, about anything, including small things." "Agreed." "Including—" She paused. Her hand closed on the locket at her throat and opened again. "Including whatever it was you imagined you were going to find when you married me. If you find a piece of it, you will tell me as you find it." "Agreed." "And one more thing." "Yes." "You will tell me, this morning, what my father did to yours. I have always been told the bones of it, that there was a quarrel, that there was a contract, that he and your father parted enemies. I have never been told the meat of it. My mother would not tell me. My aunt would not tell me. I am 25 years old, Your Grace, and I am tired of being the only person at every dinner table in England who does not know the story of her own father." He looked at her. He told her the meat of it. He told her about the forged stock certificate and the railway company that had collapsed and the £7,000 his father had borrowed on the strength of his name to make good the losses, and the way his father had walked, after that, with his head down through his own dining room. He told her about the duel that had not happened, the one Sebastian had wanted to demand at 18, and that his father had forbidden because his father would not have his only son shot for a thief. He told her that her father had been carried off, 3 years after the certificate, by consumption in a hired house in Kent. He told her his own father had followed 3 months later. He did not call it a fever. He called it what it had been, a long, slow giving up. She listened without speaking. When he had finished, her face had not changed. "Thank you," she said. "Beatrix, I had not heard the part about the £7,000. No?" "No. My mother told me that he had made a poor investment. She said the other party had taken it personally. She told me my father was not a wicked man." "He was not a wicked man," Sebastian said, and was surprised, and so was she. He was a man who had decided that one wickedness, paid for by his enemy, was owed to him for some earlier wrong. I do not know what the earlier wrong was. I have wondered about it for 8 years. My father refused to discuss it. Wondered about it? Wondered if my father had earned his ruin. I do not, in the end, believe that he had. But I have not been certain. I have only been certain of the smaller part, which is what your father did at the visible end of it. Her eyes, Mortimer's hazel, gone green as the morning light caught them, watched him steadily. That, she said slowly, is the most honest thing anyone has ever said to me about him. It cost me to say it. I know. Does it change anything? It changes everything. Toward me? Toward myself. She rose. She crossed to the sideboard, poured herself coffee, returned, and set the cup down with a small, deliberate click. She remained standing. I have one more condition, she said. Name it. You will let me ride with you, this morning. I have not been on a horse in 4 months, and I am about to lose my mind. He stood. Bring me your gloves, he said. She brought them. They rode the lower meadow that morning, then the upper, then the long ride through the beechwood that he had not let anyone but his stable lad ride in 3 years. He set her on the chestnut mare he had been gentling all month. The mare flinched once at his greatcoat and then, to his quiet astonishment, did not flinch again with Beatrix on her back. She prefers you, he said, when they had walked the horses 1/2 mile in silence. She prefers a lighter hand. She prefers you. She did not argue. The wood opened into a sloped clearing of cut hay, where the morning mist still clung in the hollows. He drew rein. She drew rein beside him. The horses blew, settling. This is the best of it, he said, before he had thought. The best of what? The estate, this view, 3 months of the year. I come here when I cannot stand my own correspondence. Why are you showing it to me? Because I do not yet know how else to apologize. She turned in the saddle. The wind lifted a strand of dark hair against her cheek. The chestnut shifted under her, and she brought it back with the smallest, surest pressure of her knee. You have apologized, she said. I'm not asking for more. You are entitled to more. I'm entitled to my own marriage, which, until 8 days ago, I was not certain I was going to have. You have given it to me, even by trying to take a piece of it away. I do not know what to do with that yet, Sebastian. But I would like, very much, not to be a person who hates her husband for surviving an honesty. He looked at her, until the looking became something he could not afford in a public meadow with a stable lad 50 yards behind them holding the spare horse. He turned the chestnut. He clucked it on. They rode home. The trouble began 3 days after the ride, with a letter. It came on a Tuesday morning, on cream paper, sealed in red wax with the cipher of a man Sebastian had not heard from in 5 years. Augustus Tilden, his father's old land agent, who had retired to Brighton and married a widow with a small fortune, and was generally believed to live a life of mild gout and large opinions. The letter was 8 lines long. It was perfectly civil. It said that Tilden had heard, with great surprise, that the Duke of Hartwell had married a Miss Beatrix Marbury of Wiltshire. That Tilden had served the elder Duke for 22 years, and remembered with painful clarity the matter of the Mortimer certificate. That Tilden was, naturally, certain that his old master's son had not committed the indiscretion of marrying the daughter of that same Mortimer under an assumed name. But that Tilden would feel himself derelict in his old service if he did not lay the question in writing at the Duke's own door. and that Tilden was prepared to travel to Hartwell at his master's son's convenience to be reassured. Sebastian read it twice. He folded it. He put it in the drawer of his estate desk. He went to find his wife. She was in the conservatory, examining the orchids his mother had abandoned 3 years ago. She was wearing the peacock blue gown she had travelled in. The locket was at her throat. She turned at the sound of his step. "Sebastian, what is it?" "A letter," he said, "from a man who knew my father. And he has heard of my marriage. He is asking, in writing, whether I am aware whom I have married." The colour did not leave her face this time. She had spent a week practicing what to do with her face when this kind of news arrived. Then he is going to tell people. He is going to tell whomever he likes, the moment my answer fails to satisfy him. He is a man with a long memory and a small dinner table. What will you write back? I have not decided. Sebastian. She set down the watering can. She crossed the conservatory until she was 3 feet from him in the green light through the glass. There is no version of this that ends with us both unscarred. Either you tell him the truth, in which case he tells London and we are made spectacles, or you tell him a lie, in which case he eventually finds out and we are made worse spectacles. Or, she met his eyes, we tell London ourselves, on our own terms, at our own moment. He had been arriving at the same conclusion since the moment he had broken the wax. He had not arrived at it as cleanly. He had arrived at it with caveats and conditions and 3 escape routes. You would do that, he said. I have spent 8 years, she said, answering the question, and your father, with my mother's name. I am very, very tired. I would rather stand in a London ballroom in a peacock blue gown and tell the truth than write one more letter under a name that is half a lie. There is a price. I know there is a price. You may be cut by people who currently call themselves your friends. They are not currently my friends. You may be, I am being honest with you, you may be cut by my own mother. I have not yet met your mother. That is what worries me. She almost smiled. She did not. She put her hand on the lapel of his coat, the first time she had touched him outside of a wedding ceremony, and said, Then write back to your father's land agent. Tell him you will explain in person. Then take me to London. To do what? To give a ball. He stared at her. A ball, he said. A ball. In our own house, 4 weeks from now, on a Friday. We will invite everyone who matters, and no one who does not. We will receive them at the door together, and at supper, you will rise, and you will tell the room, in 12 sentences or fewer, who I am. And then, we will dance. They will not stay to dance. Some of them will not. The ones who do are the ones whose opinions I shall trouble myself to value. The rest will leave by their own choice, and I will not have to spend the next 30 years pretending I do not know what they think of me. He looked at her for a long time. You are formidable, he said finally. My father was formidable. He was, in a different direction. I am aware. He took her hand off his lapel. He held it. Then we shall give a ball, he said. The ball was 4 weeks in the planning, and 3 of those weeks were the most strange and tender of Sebastian's adult life. She moved through Hartwell House like a woman who had decided to stop being careful. She ordered the linen turned out, and the silver counted, and the long gallery polished. She wrote in her own hand, 223 invitations on cream card. She received his mother, who came down from Bath in a state of high anxiety, and stayed 3 days, and left, against all his expectation, persuaded, by means of a single long afternoon in the conservatory, conducted entirely in French, the contents of which Beatrix never disclosed, and his mother referred to afterwards only as an education. She also began, quietly, to be in his rooms in the evenings. Not to share his bed, not yet. She came to read in the chair by his fire while he wrote at his desk. She came to watch him at the window when the moon came up. She came to stand behind his chair, once, with her hand on the back of his neck, the first deliberate touch of her life, and to say, "You are working too late," and to leave again before the silence had the chance to become anything worse than tender. He noticed everything. He had been trained to notice. He noticed that she had begun to wear scent, a clean lavender, not heavy, and that she had begun to laugh more easily, and that the locket at her throat now opened and closed under her thumb when she was thinking. He asked her, one evening, what was inside the locket. "My mother." "May I see?" She unclasped it and laid it open on his palm. It contained 2 miniatures, one in each oval. The left was a very young Lady Mortimer in pale green silk. The right was empty. "There used to be one of him," she said. "I took it out when I was 19. I have not yet decided what to put in its place." "You will know when you do." "Yes." "It will not be me." She closed the locket. "That is for me to decide, sir," she said. Then, the smallest. "Possibly not, but not for the reason you think." He did not press. He gave her back the locket. He watched her clasp it at her throat with the small finger of her left hand. The gesture from the altar. The gesture from the Surrey hedgerow. The gesture that had been hers since she was 13 years old and had not known a duke's son was watching. He understood, that evening, what he had not understood at the altar. He had married her because he had been waiting 8 years to find out whether the worst day of his father's life had also been the worst day of someone else's father's daughter's life. Because if it had, if a girl with the Mortimer chin had spent her own ruined adolescence in a Wiltshire cottage, learning Haydn badly, while his father walked with his head down through their dining room, then both fathers had been buried by the same wreckage, and he, Sebastian, had been a boy on the other side of the wreck, blaming a girl he had glimpsed across a hedgerow for the loss of a father he would never get back. He had married her to find out if he could stop blaming. He could. He had. He had not realized it would feel so much like falling in love. The night of the ball, Hartwell House blazed. 300 candles in the great hall, the musicians warming their strings in the gallery above, the drive lined with carriages from London, from Surrey, from Kent, footmen on the steps in dark blue livery, Mrs. Greaves at the door of the long gallery in her best black silk, watching everything and saying nothing. Sebastian stood at the head of the receiving line in evening dress and waited. She came down the staircase at 8:30 in a gown of the deepest emerald silk, cut for her shoulders, with a single rope of his grandmother's pearls at her throat. The pearls were not the locket. The locket was elsewhere, pinned, he saw later, to the lining of her sleeve, where she could feel it without anyone seeing it. He did not say anything when she reached the bottom of the stairs. There was nothing he could safely say in front of 2 footmen. He simply offered her his arm. She took it. "You are formidable," he said under the music. "I've had a great deal of practice." "At balls?" "At entrances." The first hour passed without incident. The second hour passed without incident. By the time supper was called, Sebastian could see, in the corners of the long gallery, the small clusters of older men with grey side whiskers who knew exactly who Beatrix's father had been and were waiting, with the stiff politeness of executioners, for someone else to do their work for them. Augustus Tilden was among them. He had come down from Brighton for the occasion. He was talking to a man in claret silk who, Sebastian noted without surprise, was the third son of an earl with a long memory of forged stock certificates. Sebastian rose at supper. The room quieted. He did not give the speech he had drafted. He gave a shorter one. "My friends," his voice carried without effort to the back of the long gallery. "You have come a long way to wish my wife well. Some of you have come because you knew my father. Some of you have come because you know me." He let the pause settle. The candlelight caught the edge of his glass. "A few of you." His eyes did not move toward Tilden, but he and Tilden both knew where he was looking. "Have come because you have heard a rumor. I will save you the discomfort of carrying that rumor any further. The Duchess at my right hand is the only daughter of the late Lord Mortimer of Wiltshire and the late Lady Mortimer, born Marbury. She has carried her mother's name for 8 years, with my approval as her husband, and with the prior approval of my own conscience." A small movement passed through the room, the rustle of silk on chair backs, the careful settle of cups against saucers. He did not pause for it. "There is no man in this room better placed than I to know what her father did to mine. There is no man in this room better placed than I to tell you that her father's debt is not her debt. She is my wife. I am very glad of it. Anyone who is not glad of it on her behalf is welcome to ride home tonight, and I will not, I give you my word, hold it against them tomorrow." The silence was 3 full seconds long. Then Tilden, who had served the elder Duke for 22 years, and was in the end a more decent man than his correspondence suggested, set down his glass and stood. "To the Duchess," he said. The room drank. Not all of it. Sebastian saw a knot of 3 by the east window leave their glasses untouched and walk out by the side door, with the particular straight backs of people preparing to be furious in their own carriages. He let them go. They were not the people he had married for. Beatrix, beside him, set her hand on his sleeve. "I love you," she said. She said it very quietly. The words went under the music. He looked at her. "You are 6 minutes late," he said. "I know." "I have been waiting for those words since the 3rd week." "I know." "Why now?" "Because I was not going to say it before tonight, in case I said it for the wrong reason. I wanted to say it after I had stood in my own ballroom, under my own name. I did not want to say it because you had been kind to me. I wanted to say it because I had become something." He took her hand off his sleeve. He held it in both of his. "You were always something," he said. "Yes," she said. "Now I know it." He kissed her, once, briefly, in front of the room. It was the first time he had kissed her in 8 weeks of marriage. The musicians, with the perfect tact of musicians who have been bribed in advance, struck up a waltz. He took his wife into the center of the floor. They danced. 6 months later, on a clear morning of early spring, the new Duchess of Hartwell stood at the long window of the conservatory, with her hand on the carved wooden frame, and watched her husband walk up from the lower meadow with a sprig of hawthorn in his fingers. She wore a riding habit of the deepest ruby. She had been on the chestnut mare, who now stood unflinching even in greatcoats. She was 26 years old. The locket at her throat had been opened the night before, and a new miniature placed in its right oval. Not Sebastian in the end, but their first spring together, painted in tiny watercolor by a friend. The long beach avenue with two small figures on horseback at its end. He came up the gravel path. He saw her in the window. He stopped. He held the hawthorn up so she could see it. She put her palm flat against the glass. He grinned, the unguarded grin she had earned slowly across half a year of mornings, and came on into the conservatory and put the hawthorn into her hand. "You are working too early," she said. "I am stopping now." "Good." He kissed her, in the green light through the glass, with the dignified thoroughness of a man whose mornings were all, suddenly, his to spend. The hawthorn, much later, she put in a small vase on the window of his study. It stayed there, dried and pale, for 31 years. If you have ever loved someone whose name you were taught to despise, and discovered that the name was only a name, and the person was a whole country you had not been allowed to visit, leave a comment below and tell me about it. If you would like more stories like this one, quiet, slow, certain, pull your chair closer to the fire and subscribe. Another story.